Hello everybody, this is a March 2021 Subterror deck profile. This is pure Subterror, so no Numerons or Dragoons here at all. The point of this deck is generally to go first and then negate and disrupt your opponent so much that they end up with few to no cards on the field and in their hand, and then you use that card advantage that you have and that you'll probably continue to gain to slowly beat down for the next 2 or 3 or 4 turns, and then hopefully you've won at that point. This deck can be bricky. It's definitely less consistent than Altergeist, even with the draw spells that I run. However, one plus that Subterror does have over Altergeist is that there is a hand trap that is built into the archetype and actually has another effect that contributes to the theme of Subterror. I'm not running Umastrix, but it's up to you if you want to. Some pros of Umastrix are that it's monster removal that you can probably use repeatedly, and it does have its own way of summoning itself. Some cons are the obvious, that it's bricky. Even at 1, you may not have the board necessary to summon it. And also Final Battle, which is one of the deck's go-to traps, actually does not trigger Umastrix because Umastrix is a when effect. So I'm not running Umastrix, but let's get started with the deck profile. So 3 times Guru, 3 times Fiendus. These cards are the main point of the deck, and it's what the whole thing revolves around. Guru produces advantage pretty much every turn because you can flip it face up and down with so many other cards in the deck. Hopefully you'll be able to search Fiendus as often as you can, alongside however many copies of Final Battle that you need, as well as Nemesis Archer that you occasionally need for monster removal. Fiendus is really not that helpful by itself, but as long as you have a face-up monster on the field or something in your graveyard, you can either negate or resurrect. And then Fiendus, because it can actually negate from the field, you can potentially do both with just 1 copy of Fiendus. Guru's quick effect does go very well with Nemesis Archer too, which is the next card. So 1 Nemesis Archer, super useful monster removal, and sometimes even a lifesaver when your opponent has a monster that you can't out in any other way besides using Guru or Book of Moon to turn it face down and then attack with this card. This card also has a floater effect to go directly into Guru from the deck. 2 times Artifact Lancia. So this card, it hurts Dino, it hurts Dragon, it hurts Infernoble, even Virtual World with their spell and trap banishing. But I thought 3 might brick potentially in the deck. So up to you if you want to run Ash Blossom, because Ash will hit every deck pretty much more consistently, but Lancia is still obviously a strong card. 3 Hidden City. So unfortunately a hard once per turn, but this card is essentially 3 more copies of Fiendus and Guru in the deck. This card also protects your Subterror monsters from battle, and Fiendus does have low stats. However, versus a certain deck like True King Dino, they like to play set rotation. I wasn't able to activate my Hidden City because there was a Lost World set in my field zone, and they had a face-up Dragonic Diagram. But opening this card in general is pretty much always what you want to see. Unless you do get disrupted, you will more often than not end up with a face-up Guru and a Fiendus in the hand at the least. 3 Pot of Extravagance, 2 Duality. So these cards are very necessary in this deck, seeing how inconsistent Subterror can potentially be. Even with these 5 cards or Desires, if you're playing Desires, this deck can still brick pretty badly, even if you build it well. Banishing the extra deck with Extravagance, usually not that risky, but again, versus Dino, cards like Lithosagem, the Disaster, they get rid of even more cards in your extra deck. So towards the end of the duel, in that duel specifically, I couldn't even activate my Dogmatic of Punishment, but you know, there are risks even to running a card that is as necessary in this deck as Pot of Extravagance, but I think it goes without saying that you should still run it. 2 times Book of Moon. As always, this is a very versatile card because it can interrupt your opponent or alternatively advance your own board. Again, like I said, it goes well with Nemesis Archer. Subterror Cave Clash. So this card boosts attack, also lets you recur your Fienduses, but it's most important for being the face-up Subterror card for Guru to have its quick effect live, because Guru only requires a face-up Subterror card. Harpy's Feather Duster. So this card is great in the Subterror mirror match. It's also good against some of the other best decks right now, but it's also good against older and rogue decks like Paleozoic, for example, and Terraforming to search Hidden City. So 3 times Final Battle. This card, not being a hard once per turn, it lets you use more than one of its effects in one turn. This card gives a very necessary attack boost to your Subterror monsters. Definitely a must play at 3, alongside its obvious and very necessary flipping face up and down effects. 3 times Solemn Judgment. So this is a great card, but as great as it is, using 2 of these on your opponent's turn brings your life points down to 2,000. So even against some miscellaneous pendulum decks, something that I was playing against, they can oftentimes keep extending their play beyond your 2 negations of their most critical card or their link summon. So when you end up with 2,000 life points, that may not be enough to survive the rest of the turn. But that said, this deck, like Altergeist, is subject to evenly match and especially to Lightning Storm. So you don't always have Fiendus ready to go to negate. So Solemn Judgment's still an important card to stop something like Lightning Storm. 3 Dogmatic Punishment. So with Entis in the extra deck, this card effectively pops 2 cards, or it can send Omega to the graveyard for a chance to mess with your opponent's graveyard. However, just be wary that if your opponent is playing Mystic Mine, your Entis won't actually go off when you resolve punishment because you can't activate monster effects. 3 times Impermanence. So some people choose to play Veiler in this deck, but Impermanence not only has its normal benefits over Veiler, but this card also works with Trap Trick. 2, there can be only 1. I really do feel that 3 of this card is risky to run because you may end up drawing or opening multiple copies of it, but Pure Zodiac, for example, has all Beast Warriors in the main deck and also almost entirely in the extra deck too. And another example, Virtual World has a couple different types that they're working with, but it still hurts that deck. Subterror, it does rely on Floodgates pretty heavily, so it should be a good idea to run at least 1 copy of this card. 2 times Solemn Strike. So this card, in addition to stopping monster effects, is useful because it only requires 1,500 life points instead of half of them. So it is definitely better earlier on in the game, especially with Triple Judgment and the Soul Drain that I do run in the deck as well. But these counter traps, this card and Judgment, are of course good for being spell speed 3. 1 Soul Drain. So this card does hurt a lot of decks, a lot of the top decks like Dragon, but also Shaddoll, Burning Abyss, even Thunder Dragon. Soul Drain, it just fits very well in this deck because it doesn't conflict with any Subterror effects for the monsters, except for the second effect of Archer, which you don't always need. And finally, Trap Trick for the main deck. So with the amount of traps that I run, there's the risk of opening multiple copies of Trap Trick as well. I thought it would be a good idea to run only 1 Trap Trick. Because Final Battle sets itself, you generally just need to set that 1 Final Battle, unless you really need the Dogmatica trap, but I think Trap Trick, it works at 1. So for the extra deck, 3 Entis, 3 Flower Cardian Light Flare. So these cards are here, needless to say, for Dogmatica Punishment, 1 for popping an extra card, and 1 just in case your opponent has a very high attack monster. 3 Nightmare Phoenix. So this is an important card in the deck because I only run the 1 limited Harpy's Feather Duster. 3 Link Haribo. So this is generally the card that you want to make with your Fiendus because there aren't too many ways to stop battle in this deck. Finally, Relinquished Anima, Omega, and Boral Sword. So Anima is another good option for your Fiendus if your opponent does happen to have a monster in the correct zone. Omega, I already mentioned, goes with Dogmatica Punishment, and it does hurt a deck like Infernoid pretty severely. And I do like running Boral Sword in this deck because even though there are very few monsters, you don't always have the materials to make this card. Sometimes you do need to close the game quicker than just beating down with multiple gurus. So I like Boral Sword in this deck. That's pretty much the Subterror deck profile. While this deck is great, one of the reasons why Altergeist is more consistent than Subterror is that many of the cards in the Subterror deck are more or less useless without the ace card of Subterror Guru, namely Final Battle and Fiendus. So overall, I do like to play with Altergeist over Subterror.